And these guys, the orcs, man, they're a lot more than just the mindless brutes you might think. I mean, when you really get down into it, they've got some interesting stuff going on. Like their technology, for one, we're going to be looking into how that even works. And their society. Yeah, their culture is actually pretty complex. So we're going to unpack all that. And their relationship with fungi. Seriously, that's a thing.
You know, it's really easy to just sort of dismiss orcs as a mindless horde. But they really have made a place for themselves out there in the galaxy. I mean, their numbers, they might even rival humanity's. Which says something about how effective they are, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that's a good point. It really does make you wonder, where did these guys even come from? What's their origin story?
Well, the most interesting theory, and actually one the orcs themselves believe, is that they were created by a super advanced civilization called the Old Ones. Orcs refer to them as the Brain Boys.
Whoa, hold on. You're saying that the orcs were somebody's science experiment?
Exactly. It has thought that the Old Ones created them as a weapon to fight in an ancient galactic war against the Necrons.
I mean, I get that they're strong and tough, but I mean, they're not just mindless killing machines, right?
Right. And the key to understanding that is something called the technogene, which is literally in their DNA. This gene gives them an innate understanding of both fighting and technology.
Okay, so that's how their tech works. Even though it kind of looks like they just kind of bash things together until they explode. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. But if enough orcs believe that something will work, it often does.
Wow.
It's this collective psychic energy fueled by belief and aggression.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and that actually plays a huge role in not just their technology, but their overall success as a species.
Okay, so we're starting to see how they're more than just these mindless brutes. They've got this weird combination of like brute force and this strange, almost mystical technology. But just to step back for a second, what do these orcs actually look like?
Okay, so picture this. Green skin, red blood, built like tanks. They are incredibly strong and tough. They can shrug off injuries that would cripple other species.
Yeah, and I've heard they can survive some pretty gruesome stuff, too. Like, I heard losing their head isn't even necessarily a deal breaker for these guys.
You're not kidding. They can be stitched back together, no problem. They feel very little pain and actually find the suffering of others hilarious.
That's kind of dark.
Yeah, pretty dark sense of humor. But it fits with their overall personality, you know?
That's so wild. And so this is where it gets really interesting to me. I've heard that orcs actually grow bigger and stronger as they win battles and gain respect. Is that true?
It is. It's not just some cool idea. It's a biological fact.
Wow.
The more successful an orc is, the more respect he gets. And that fuels his physical growth.
So the more they believe in themselves, the bigger they get.
Exactly.
It's like winning solves everything for them.
Pretty much, yeah.
So does that apply to all of them? Or is it just the pure orcs, as we've been talking about?
Well, the orc ecosystem is actually pretty diverse. You've got the Gretchen, or Grots, as they're often called. Smaller, more cunning, definitely not afraid to exploit a situation.
Yeah.
Then there's the Snotlings.
Yeah.
Even tinier creatures that, well, let's just say they sometimes get integrated into orc weaponry in some interesting way.
Oh, right. And how can we forget the squigs? I mean, the strange fungal creatures that orcs seem to use for everything.
Right. The squigs are everywhere. They range from like harmless little critters to massive beasts of burden and sometimes snacks. Yeah. Orcs have a very, let's be honest, kind of messed up relationship with them.
Yeah. That's kind of disturbing. Okay, so we've got these incredibly resilient creatures. They've got this very bizarre but seemingly effective tech that's powered by belief, all within this really diverse ecosystem. But how does their society actually function? It can't just be a free-for-all all the time.
You'd be surprised. There's a system in place. But it's definitely not what we would consider civilized. It's a brutal meritocracy where might makes right the strongest rule. Violence is a perfectly acceptable way to communicate.
It's like a mosh pit with a pecking order.
You got it.
So basically, the biggest, toughest orc gets to call the shots. So cunning and intelligence have no place in their hierarchy.
Well, brute force is definitely important, but it's not the whole story. Orcs also value cunning and strategic thinking, especially when it comes to warfare. I mean, remember, these are the guys who have conquered huge swaths of the galaxy, so there's some organization there. They're organized into tribes, each ruled by a war boss, the strongest and most cunning orc around. And within these tribes, they further divide into distinct clans, each with its own unique culture and approach to war.
So size matters, but brains don't hurt.
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
So tell me a little bit more about these clans. What are some of the big names? What makes them tick?
All right, well, you've got your major players, like the Bad Moons. who are obsessed with wealth and status symbols. You've got the evil sons, who worship speed above all else. The Death Skulls, who are all about scavenging and looting. The Goths, who live for pure, unadulterated brutality. The Snakebites, who are more attuned to nature and prefer a cunning, guerrilla-style warfare. And then you've got the Blood Axes, known for incorporating tactics they've observed from other races, even humans.
Blood axes using tactics. That doesn't sound very orky.
They are definitely the outliers.
Yeah.
But, even their willingness to adapt and learn from others speaks to that underlying orc pragmatism. If something works, they'll use it. Even if it doesn't fit the traditional image of a wild, reckless orc. They might scoff at it, call it unorky, but they'll do it. And hey, you can't argue with results, right? They're proof that even in a society that glorifies brute strength, there's still room for a bit of cunning and adaptability. And speaking of adapting, we can't forget about the freebooters. They're not a clan in the traditional sense, but more like space pirates, who perfectly embody that orc love of loot and a good fight.
It's incredible how much diversity there is within their society. You've got these distinct clans, each with its own, unique flavor and approach to war. And even the oddballs who bend the rules to suit their needs, it really challenges the stereotype of them being this mindless, homogenous horde.
Exactly. And that diversity is only amplified when you consider the odd boys, the specialists who keep orc society running. Think of them as the cogs in the well-aged machine, without whom everything would grind to a halt.
Odd boys. Okay, this sounds intriguing. Who are these guys and what makes them so special?
Well, you've got your mech boys, the orky equivalent of engineers and mechanics, constantly tinkering and creating bizarre contraptions. That somehow work. Then there are the pain boys, who handle the, let's call it healthcare, in a way that would make a human doctor faint.
I can only imagine. Given their pain tolerance, what does orc surgery even look like?
Let's just say, a good knock on the head is their preferred method of pain management.
Yeah.
They're more into fixing than finesse.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
You've also got the weird boys, the orcs who dabble in psychic powers. They're a bit different from other psychers in the Warhammer 40K universe, because they don't draw their power from the warp. Instead, they tap into the collective psychic energy of the Waaagh, that's the name for the orc gestalt field, generated by their belief in aggression.
So the more orcs believe in something, the more powerful their weird boys become.
That's exactly it. It's both fascinating and frightening. Because, as you can imagine, a large gathering of orcs can generate some serious psychic energy.
I bet.
But there's a catch. If a weird boy gets too powerful, let's just say there's a reason they wear those heavy helmets.
Oh, okay. I don't even want to picture that. What other specialists do they have?
Well, there are the mad boys.
Yeah.
Who are a bit off. Even by orc standards, they're unpredictable, often driven by strange fixations, but surprisingly effective in battle. Because, well, who can plan for that kind of crazy?
That's true.
And then you've got the runt herds, who specialize in herding and managing the Gretchen. They're often quite wealthy, using their grots as everything, from a workforce to, unfortunately, shields and minesweepers.
It's dark, but I can see the humor in that,
Right.
Exploiting the smaller creatures around you. It's
Yeah.
definitely something an orc would do.
Definitely.
So what about the speed freaks? I've heard about those too. What's their deal?
Oh yeah, the speed freaks. Those are the orcs obsessed with anything that goes fast. They live for the thrill of the ride, often modifying their vehicles to insane degree. You know that saying, red ones go faster?
Yeah.
Well, for speed freaks, it's practically a religious truth.
So we've got bioengineered super soldiers with a hierarchy built on strength and cunning, who utilize technology powered by belief and have specialists for everything, from building to brain surgery.
Got it.
What's not to love?
And we're just scratching the surface. We haven't even touched on the phenomena of the Waaagh, which is essentially a planet-smashing green tide of unstoppable fury.
A planet-smashing green tide. You definitely have my attention.
Yeah, the Waaagh. It's more than just a catchy name for an orc invasion. It's this psychic phenomenon. It amplifies their strength, it fuels their technology, and basically turns them into this unstoppable force of nature. Imagine the combined energy of millions, even billions, of orcs, all focused on a single goal: conquest and destruction.
That sounds terrifying.
It is. It's enough to make even the most seasoned galactic empires nervous.
So it's like their collective belief literally shapes reality.
Pretty much, yeah.
But how does one of these Waaagh even get started?
It could be a couple of things. Sometimes it's a spark, a vision experienced by a powerful war boss, or a particularly potent weird boy.
Right.
Other times it's more of a slow burn, this growing sense of restlessness and aggression. That spreads throughout an orc population.
So like almost like a contagious thing?
Kind of like that.
So one orc gets this itch to fight
Exactly.
and conquer.
And smash everything in sight.
And then he starts spreading the word, and it just spreads like wildfire.
It's like a chain reaction.
Yeah.
Gathering momentum as more and more orcs join the frenzy.
Yeah, like a snowball rolling downhill.
Exactly.
Picking up mass and speed until it's this unstoppable avalanche of green.
You got it.
So the bigger the war gets, the more powerful it becomes.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing. As the woke grows, the orcs' collective psychic energy intensifies, fueling their technology, making them even stronger, and attracting even more orcs to the cause.
Oh, wow.
It's this self-perpetuating cycle of destruction.
And the end result is a planet-smashing green tide.
That's the goal.
It's terrifying and awesome.
It is.
All at the same time.
Are all Walker Ages created equal?
There are stages, yeah. It might start as a local conflict, a squabble over territory or resources.
But then it escalates, drawing in more and more orcs, until it consumes entire star systems.
Whoa!
It's the kind of thing that makes every other species in the galaxy tremble in fear.
Oh, yeah. I can see why. It's not just that they're strong, it's that it's like this force of nature that can spiral out of control at any moment.
Exactly.
But are they driven purely by instinct, or is there some sort of belief system at play here?
Well, orcs do have a sort of religion, but it's not exactly Sunday school material.
Right.
They worship two gods, Gork and Mork, who embody the two sides of the orc psyche, brutal and cunning.
So like the ultimate expressions of orkiness.
Exactly.
But which god is which?
That's the funny thing about orcs. Even they can't seem to agree on who's who. It's this paradox, a reflection of their own nature. Gork is said to be brutal but cunning, while Mork is cunning but brutal. Ask 10 orcs and you'll get 10 different answers.
Oh, wow.
On which god represents which trait.
It's almost philosophical,
Right
or
on.
maybe just really, really confusing.
Yeah, maybe a little of both.
How does this belief system actually manifest itself in their society, though?
Well, not in the way you might imagine. Their worship of Gork and Mork, it's expressed through their actions, their constant drive to fight, to conquer, to build bigger and better weapons.
So their entire culture is a form of worship.
You could say that, yeah.
So instead of stained glass windows and chanting, they build giant planet-smashing war machines.
Exactly.
Wow.
Those colossal walkers they build, the Gargants and Stompas, they're like walking embodiments of Gork and Mork.
Yeah.
They're not just weapons, they're symbols of faith, idols built to inspire awe and terror.
So it's like faith can move mountains.
For the orcs.
Except they make the mountains explode. That's a great way to put it. So that brings us back to the technology itself, the technogene and the Waaagh field.
Right.
Those are the keys to understanding how all of this seemingly impossible tech works.
They are.
So it all comes down to belief. The more orcs believe in something, the more likely it is to work.
That seems to be the case.
That goes against everything we understand about science and engineering.
It definitely defies our conventional understanding of physics and technology. But for the orcs, it's a fact of life. Their collective psychic energy, fueled by belief and aggression, literally shapes their reality.
Wow.
They might not have equations and blueprints, but they have something just as powerful: conviction.
So give me some examples. What kind of wacky contraptions are we talking about here?
Oh, man, where do I even begin? There's the shock attack gun, which fires projectiles through the warp, a dimension of pure psychic energy.
So warp travel through a gun.
Basically.
Yeah.
That sounds messy.
It is. It's wildly unpredictable, as likely to hit its target as it is to teleport a nearby grot into the next star system.
It's pure or chaos embodied in a gun.
So what else?
Then you've got the Defcoptus, their version of helicopters, held together by more hope than engineering. But somehow they fly.
That's incredible.
They're loud, they're clunky, they're dangerous. And they perfectly embody that orc love of speed and mayhem.
What about their more grounded weapons? What's their go-to for dealing out damage?
Well, there's the iconic Def gun. Basically, if an orc can point it at something and yell "Daka" while pulling the trigger, it's a Def gun.
So what's Daka?
It's their version of spray and pray.
Okay.
They're not concerned with precision or accuracy. It's all about volume of fire, making those guns as killing as possible.
So they take junk, scrap, whatever they can get their hands on, and turn it into weapons of war just by believing it will work.
That's the gist of it.
That's terrifying and inspiring at the same time. Does this make their technology unreliable? Like, what happens if the orcs lose faith in a particular weapon?
Well, that's the interesting thing. Orc tech often only works for orcs, or those closely associated with them. It seems that the non-Orcish mind simply can't grasp the logic or lack thereof. That makes their technology function.
It's like their weapons are extensions of their collective will.
Exactly.
Wow. How does this translate to the battlefield?
Okay, picture this. An Ork YGH descends upon a planet. The sky is filled with crude but deadly aircraft. On the ground, hordes of green-skinned warriors charge into battle, wielding this bewildering array of crude but effective weapons. Explosions rock the landscape as their massive war machines lumber forward, crushing everything in their path.
So basically a giant green mosh pit of destruction.
Pretty much.
Fueled by belief.
And a thirst for a good scrap.
Okay.
Exactly.
So break down some of the units for me.
All right, so at the core you have the boys, the basic Orc infantry. They're violent, simple, and they love a good scrap.
They sound fun.
They are. Armed with their trusty choppas, they're the backbone of any WH.
What's a chop?
A choppa is basically any sharp, pointy object an Orc can swing at an enemy.
Okay.
Think axes, swords, even sharpened pieces of scrap metal.
So less finesse.
Way less.
More about hitting something really hard.
Right.
Okay, so the boys are the rank and file. What about the elites?
Then you have the knobs, who lead the boys into battle.
All right.
They're the veterans, the ones who've survived countless battles, earned the respect of their peers. They're decked out in trophies taken from fallen enemies. They often have crude cybernetic enhancements from their pain boys.
Oh, right.
They're tougher, meaner. They hit harder than your average boy.
They sound like a force of nature.
They are.
What other specialists are there, aside from the odd boys?
Well, you've got the tank bustas, obsessed with blowing up enemy tanks and claiming the wreckage as their own. They're fearless, almost suicidally brave.
Yeah.
And they carry some of the most powerful anti-tank weapons in the Orc arsenal. Then there are the commandos, who are surprisingly sneaky for a species that usually prefers a good, loud charge.
Commandos. Sneaky orcs. I never would have thought of that.
Don't underestimate their adaptability. Orcs are a lot more versatile than they're given credit for.
Okay.
And when it comes to getting the job done, they're not afraid to bend the rules, even if it means being a little un-orky in the process.
That's awesome. So we've got the infantry, the elites, the specialists. What about their vehicles?
Well, Orcs love their vehicles. It plays into their love of speed, noise, and sheer destructive power. Think Mad Max on a galactic scale.
Okay.
They've got warbikers for fast attack, Defcoptas buzzing overhead, and trucks, their primary mode of transportation.
Zip trucks?
Yeah.
What are those?
They're basically just big, loud, ramshackle trucks packed full of Orcs.
Sounds fun.
It is. And then, of course, you can't forget about the battle wagons.
Battle wagons.
Yeah. Massive, heavily armored vehicles that are essentially mobile fortresses, bristling with guns and packed with boys eager to get into a good scrap.
So their vehicles are just as chaotic and ramshackle as their weapons?
Pretty much.
But I bet they're a lot of fun to drive.
Oh, yeah. In a very, very dangerous kind of way.
Right.
And then we haven't even mentioned their big toys yet, the Gargants and Stompus.
Oh, right.
The walking idols of Gork and Mork. These are the heavy artillery of the Orc Way GH. City-smashing behemoths, capable of laying waste to entire armies, with their massive guns and sheer size.
I bet those are a nightmare to face on the battlefield.
They are. Imagine a building-sized creature stomping across the battlefield, blasting apart tanks and pulverizing infantry.
I don't even want to think about it.
It's a sight to behold, and one that usually signals a very bad day for whoever's on the receiving end.
So how do these guys fare in the Warhammer 40K game?
Well, the Orcs are a beloved faction in the tabletop game, known for their unique playstyle and their ability to overwhelm opponents with sheer numbers and brute force.
They sound like a blast to play.
They are. They have this really cool aesthetic. Their technology is fascinating, and their whole philosophy is just so over the top.
I can see the appeal. What are some of their signature tactics in the game?
Well, their most famous, or infamous, depending on who you ask, is the Sea of Green tactic.
Sea of Green? What is that?
The idea is to flood the battlefield with as many orcs as you can, overwhelming your opponent with sheer numbers.
Oh, wow. So quantity over quality.
You could say that, yeah.
Just throw enough bodies at the problem until it goes away.
That's the Orc way.
It's a simple strategy, but it seems to work for them.
It does. It plays into everything we've learned about them so far. Strength, numbers, and a complete disregard for personal safety.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That's the beauty of the Orcs. They're unpredictable, they're chaotic.
Yeah.
And they're incredibly fun to play. They're a constant reminder that sometimes the simplest approach is the most effective, especially when you have a WGH on your side.
That's a good point. You know what's amazing? They seem so simple on the surface, but they're actually really complex and fascinating. violent, destructive, but there's this almost poetic approach to life and war. It's compelling.
It really is. And what's so fascinating is, for all their brutality, there's a certain purity to them. They don't overthink things. They don't get bogged down in existential angst or anything like that. They just are. They live in the moment, driven by instinct.
Yeah.
And this primal need to fight and conquer.
It's a very different way of existing.
It is.
You almost wonder if there's something we can learn from them. Not the violence, of course, but that sense of absolute conviction and purpose.
Right.
They believe in themselves, and they believe in their way of life.
Yeah.
And they're not afraid to fight for what they believe in. It's admirable in a twisted sort of way.
It does raise some interesting questions. I mean, is there something to be said for their simple, straightforward approach to life?
Yeah.
Or is it just a cautionary tale about, the dangers of unchecked aggression and blind faith?
It's probably a bit of both. I mean, on the one hand, you have to admire their tenacity and their ability to achieve great things through sheer force of will. But on the other hand, their violent nature and their complete disregard for anything that doesn't fit into their worldview, it's definitely a cause for concern.
For sure. They're a force to be reckoned with. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
I think it reminds us that there are forces at play in the galaxy that operate on a completely different level than we do.
Yeah.
They challenge our assumptions about intelligence, about civilization, what it even means to be a successful species.
They're a force of nature. It's like this chaotic element that defies easy categorization. You can try to understand them, analyze their motives, but ultimately, they're a mystery, this wild card in this grand game of galactic survival.
And that's what makes them so captivating. They force us to confront our own preconceived notions, our own biases about what constitutes intelligence, or a valid way of life, They're a mirror, reflecting back our own capacity for violence and destruction, but also our potential for resilience, adaptation, and unwavering belief.
This deep dive has been a wild ride. From bioengineered super soldiers, to psychic mushroom tech, to planet-smashing YGHs. We've explored their bizarre biology, their surprisingly complex society, and their unique, almost mystical approach to technology.
And like you said, we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to learn about the Orks, their history, their culture, their impact on the Warhammer 40K universe. They're constantly evolving, always finding new ways to surprise and amaze, even terrify those who encounter them.
So what does all of this mean for you, our listener? What have we learned from our deep dive into the world of orcs?
I think the biggest takeaway is they're more than just mindless brutes. They're a complex, fascinating species with their own unique culture, beliefs, way of life. They're a reminder that the galaxy is a vast and unpredictable place, full of wonders and dangers that challenge our understanding of what's possible.
And they're a reminder that strength doesn't always come from technology or advanced intellect. Sometimes it comes from this raw, primal will, a shared belief in something bigger than yourself.
Sneely, the Orks might not be the most sophisticated or enlightened species out there, but they do have something that many others lack: conviction. They believe in themselves, they believe in their way of life, and they're not afraid to fight for what they believe in.
And that's something we can all learn from, even if we don't agree with their methods.
For sure.
So as we wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep driving deep into the worlds that fascinate you.